Hello everyone, my name is Raul Perez. I'm a graphic design student here at NSU, and today I'm here to talk about rigging in Blender and just give you guys a quick run through on how that works. The process of rigging pretty much is you have a 3D model and you're inserting like bones or like a wireframe inside of the model itself that will act as like a skeleton for you to be able to move and pose that model. Because with just the model itself, you won't be able to actually manipulate it and pose it however you want. For this process, there are also a lot of plugins and like external tools that can pretty much do the whole process for you. But those automatic like tools, sometimes they'll mess up like a region or two. And that's where the skills in this video are needed in case you need to actually manually adjust or tweak certain features. Or if you have just like a model that's very complex, that's like maybe not such a humanoid shape or it's very unique, then these automatic tools won't often really work as intended. So again, it's really important to have this basic understanding and skill set in mind if you want to keep going forward with rigging. So to start off with this project, I've downloaded a human model, and I will credit in the description. But to get started, I'm in object mode. I'm going to add an armature, and from there, I'm going to go into edit mode. And in the viewport display, I'm going to put in front, which will means that the armature already put a bone in for me at the starting point or at the origin. And putting in front just means that I can see it even if it's like inset in the model at all times. So with one on the numpad to center it, I'm going to select it and scale it with S. And like move it up a bit because I want to make sure that this covers like the spine. And that's like a pretty good. And then I'm going to right click it and then subdivide once and subdivide again. And so now I have this kind of like a rudimentary like spine shape. And then from here, we could go up here, press 3 on the numpad, and we grab just like the ball here end and use E to extrude to create like a neck, E again to create like the head shape. And from there, we kind of created like a very basic spine that we could use to going forward. Now with the spine in place, we need to start working on like the limbs of the arms. And notice how my model is symmetrical. And so while I could, make one side of the arm first and the other side, that would be really inefficient. So what we could do is we open up kind of this toolbar over here, and under options, we can enable x-axis mirror. And you'll see that if I find this point on the spine where I want the shoulders to come out from, and I use Shift and E to extrude, you can see that now it's like mirroring the action on both sides of the model. So like I'll go to the shoulder, then again for like the forearm, and then once more for like the rest of the arm. And you can see that it copied the motion along all like both sides of the model. Now if I turn to side profile, you see that like the model doesn't quite fit in, but with just using G, I can pretty closely get it to fit in. So yeah, and then again, the action that I did on this side will replicate on the other side, which is really handy, and it can help really improve the efficiency of you creating your model as you're working on it. Now in cases like this, I've gone ahead and added like the joints to the hand, and you can see that it's kind of a complicated model where once you start like manipulating all of these joints, it might start getting a bit complicated. So joints like these, you can actually afford to delete them actually with X, and if I delete the bones, you can see that it has a line here, which means that this bone is parented to this object. So they're still connected, it's just one less like bone that I have to worry about in the final process. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to align the fingers to pretty much fit inside. The bones will align inside each of the fingers, and then we'll be ready to proceed from there. Alright, so I deleted some of the other bones that were kind of redundant, and we can move the fingers. Again, you're going to have to go from between like 1 on the numpad and 3 on the numpad, or you can, hold down the middle mouse button to really get like a really precise view in order to line up all of the bones. So again, all these are connected by lines still, meaning that they're still parented to this like bone structure. But for example, if you want to add like, for example, the hips here where it's kind of disconnected, I'm going to add a single bone. Okay, I'm going to move it and rotate. And so with this, I am placing the hip where I want it to be. You can see that I did that there. Let me duplicate this and put it on this side. Rotate to fit. And so let's say that I want to like attach these bones, because these bones right now are not attached to like the rest of the model, like the fingers are. So I'm gonna select both of these as well as like this bone, and then with Control P, I'm gonna keep the parent while keeping the offset. And you can see now that it gave those lines that will join these like thighs, or the femurs pretty much, to the hips, which is kind of what we want, and that emulates like our actual human anatomy. So now that I fully like rigged like the legs and the hips and everything, we need to now pair our model to our rig, because if we try to just move the rig now, the bones will move outside of the model, and that's no good. So we go back into object mode, and we select both our rig and our model, and we press Control P. We can pretty much set the parent with automatic weights, which is what we want. And so with that, we now have pose mode. And if we go in here, for example, I can move this bone around and the model will move with it. But the issue with this is that sometimes if you want to move like the whole arm, you gotta move this arm up first and then this arm later. And it's a bit of a hassle. But another issue they might encounter at this step of the process with automatic weights is that some parts of your model aren't moving along as they should. This could happen. You have like clothing on like your model where like the person is moving, but then their clothes get stuck behind. So to fix that, we can go back to object mode, and then I can click the model and see now we have the option of weight painting. So and then down here we can also select the bones we want to focus on. Let me just find a better bone for this example. Okay, this is good. And so here, I'm explaining what weights are in Blender. Weight is pretty much how much influence a certain bone has on your model when you're moving it. And so this is represented like a gradient in Blender with blue, meaning, because weights range from 0 to 1. Blue represents 0, means no influence, so no matter how much I move this bone, this like torso area will not budge at all. And red means total influence, or 1. Which if I move this bone, then, you know, the arm will move as it should. But for example, if I have like clothing or a piece of armor that gets stuck down here when I move the model up, what I could do is I could like brush on influence. So you see here that if I'm holding down my mouse, you can see that I'm like painting on like the surface of the model. And so later on, if I move this arm, this part of the model will start moving as well. So this is just like a manual way that you can go in and fix any errors that the automatic weights has created, which also can be helpful if you use an automatic process like a plugin or an outside source, so sometimes they mess up the weighting. This is how you would fix that in that case. So as I mentioned before, you know, our model is ready to be posed now, but the issue that I brought up was that if I want to move the arm up, I'm going to have to move multiple segments all individually at once, and that's too much of a hassle. And so there is a way to pretty much kind of automate this process, in which you would only move like the hand or the ending bones here, and Blender would automatically compute the angle and like the rotation that these joints have to move to look natural. And to do that, we need to use IK, or inverse kinematics. And so in order to add one of these, it is also advisable that you have like a bone that's not being parented with the rest of the model in order to do this. And it will make more sense once I do it. For example, I'm going to copy this bone. I'm going to duplicate it if I can. Wait, no, edit mode. Yeah, duplicate. It's doing the same thing on the other side, but I'm going to Alt-P to remove its parent. It did it on the other side. I'm going to scale it just so it's easier for me to grab. And again, I want this kind of close to the hand. And then I'm going to create another one of these as well, by where the elbow is going to be. And I will explain like the purpose of all this later. But yeah, where like the elbow will be bending in like a natural like position, pretty much is what we want to get here. So as I do that, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to enter pose mode now, and then I'm going to select this forearm, and with this I am going to add a bone constraint. So here I find here in this menu, I'm going to find inverse kinematics. You see now that this is like colored differently. So the target, I want to put that's the armature. For the bone, I drop this and I'm going to use this bone that I created. And you can see that the model kind of tilted a bit in a funny way. So if we adjust this chain length option, we can see that now we added that influence to two of the bones. And once I finish, I'll like move it around so we can see what's going on. Or actually, no, I'll move it now. So if I move this bone, you can see now that it's kind of the control bone actually. Yeah, so we got something kind of like close to what we want, but sometimes like the elbow can look a little bit disjointed, and that's a bit of an issue. And so to fix that, what we can do is go back to the bone that we're working on, and we add a pole target, armature again, and then I'm going to pick the elbow bone that I created, and you see that it kind of broke a little bit, but that's when you play with the pole angle. Into there, I adjust it to a point where it kind of looks natural. So now, if I move the control bone that I made, now that movement looks a lot more fluid, it looks more natural. Well, actually, not quite yet. But you can always go back and keep changing the pole value, pole angle, until it's at a point that you feel like you're happy with. But yeah, that is pretty much like the most optimal way to start posing things in Blender. Because again, if you try to do everything individually, then it'll be too much of a hassle to animate, especially if you're adding in keyframes or trying to do some more of a stop motion like style. But we can also just repeat this process through all of the limbs in order to fully create a model that's able to be manipulated a lot more easily than otherwise. So here now, I've already added all of the inverse kinematics to all of the limbs now, and so I quickly was able to manipulate the model into this pose. For example, I could move this arm back and forward, and if it ever like you move it away and it starts like breaking like that, then always go back to the like inverse kinematics. You select that bone that's highlighted yellow, and you just adjust the pole angle until it looks right. I mean, there was just a really quick example, but for example, this is really for like renders. We're trying to get like specific pose just right. For animation, it might be a bit of a different process you might want to go to in order to facilitate like readjusting and adding keyframes over and over and over again. But for mostly like conceptual art, this is more than enough. You create your model, and also when you do automatic weights in Blender. Try to make your model not have too many polygons because it can't handle it. It's like way too heavy of a file or a model. But there's tools to like reduce the polygon count if you need to. But yeah, that's pretty much wraps up like the basics of this. You can dive a lot deeper into this to really get into whatever niche you need to for your project. But I hope that this at least helped you get started and troubleshoot simple problems in the future if you decide to use like other processes as well. And with that, thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.